Hello, and welcome to Bigfoot Odyssey. I hope everybody's doing all right out there tonight. It is, of course, Sunday Conversations, and we've got a bit of a crowd here tonight. Something which I think will be interesting, and I feel like one of our guests is going to be like a breath of fresh air to this subject, bringing some really interesting questions about this subject. I just want to say that, a couple of weeks back, I was watching a favourite channel of mine on YouTube, Sean Atwood, normally follow him for true crime and police and prison stories. And I switched it on one day, and I can't believe I'm seeing Doug Highcheck on there being interviewed by our guest Andrew tonight. I'll introduce everyone in a second. But it was like on for like 20 minutes, and I could feel almost like a mix of emotions of like Doug trying to explain what Bigfoot is to someone who just doesn't know anything about Bigfoot and is asking those like typical questions like, how can you prove this to me in a kind of fashion? And I wrote to Andrew and I said, you need more time with this subject to really get a grip on what it's about. And I wanted to kind of like filter through everything that's out there, all the kind of bits and pieces that don't really make any sense, and really get into the nitty gritty of some important people who have experience, have some knowledge. Larry Batson has been interviewing people about Bigfoot, before the internet was out, when things were really being documented, written down, diaries were kept, journals. Dr. Declan Meldrum, who holds probably the best evidence that anybody has. He has over 300, probably more now, casts that he houses in his lab, full professor of autonomy and anthropology. Try to get that word right. I've done it. Well done. And of course, Kerry, who had, a terrifying face-to-face encounter and has seen one of those things. So I'm hoping Andrew here, who is a journalist, BBC, ex-BBC, I think. I don't want to mess it up, but you're BBC, you're a journalist, you look into things, you've done documentaries. We'll get into a little bit more about what you're doing, but welcome everybody tonight. And I hope I'm giving really Andrew a platform here to ask these questions to these people, to, who maybe have some answers. I don't know, but let's give it a go. Welcome everybody anyway.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Do you want me to just go? Shall I introduce? Well, you did introduce me, didn't you? Actually, I don't need to introduce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can introduce yourself as well if you want. If you've got more to say.
I'm Andrew. Yeah, ex-BBC is right. It's so hard to keep getting documentaries out with them, and that's why I started my own channel, actually, because you can't. There is so. I mean, for example, if I said to the BBC guys, I'd like to make a documentary about Bigfoot, I think they'd probably just tell me where to go, because they don't really like those edgy different topics, which is why I wanted to make the channel. It's why I enjoy talking to people like you. And you're totally right, because on Sean's show, basically they tell us like an hour before. It's the producer, Ash, who's a very nice man, and he just sends us an email and he says, these are the people you're going to speak to. And it can just be anything, as you'll know from being a Sean Atwood fan, because Sean is bonkers. He's totally crazy. So he can cover all sorts of subjects. So one minute it'll be like about woke culture or the other side, or about racism or politics, and then it will be about Bigfoot, and then there'll be somebody who identifies as a wolf woman or something. So, and you've got like 10 minutes to like get your head around it and look at like a few points that they've given us usually, and then to go like, okay, and you're thrown to the lions. Yeah, no, it's not at all. So, and the other thing is, and this, I think this is why Sean and I get on really well, is that we try never to, as much as possible, not to moralize and not to not to judge and say like, oh, I know more than these people and I'm better than these people or cleverer than these people, because I just think that is something that, because I've interviewed a lot of different cult people who have left cults, and I think they call it like a thought stopping idea, or thought stopping language, anything that's like, disparaging that something might be true or might not be true, and I hate that stuff. So for me, it's like, okay, let's find out what's going on. Who the hell knows? What do I know? I don't know anything. So Larry, what's going on?
I don't know anything.
Does anyone here know something?
Not much more than they're out there. That's all I know.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here. And I suppose, Daniela, do you want me to direct questions at specific people, or should I just ask
Yeah.
and someone can sort of go for
Yeah,
it, maybe?
try that, and then we'll see what we can come up
Yeah.
with, you know.
Okay, what the hell is Bigfoot?
Who are you asking?
Yeah, okay. Oh, we're just going to go with that. What?
Ask Kerry. Ask Kerry what he saw, you know.
Kerry, what'd you see, Kerry?
Oh, well, I mean, what I saw was I thought was a guy coming through the woods, and it was through thicket, probably 130, 140 feet away. And I mean, I was sure it was somebody until it got close enough. It had gone through the thicket. I could still hear him moving, couldn't see it, but comes up in a little gap between or beside two small trees and started making just an ungodly sound at me. So it was all directed toward me, but it was highly situational. You know, I had been in this place for 7 years, had these things all around. I had no idea. There were, you know, I was suspicious that there were people messing around out there, and it just, none of it made any sense, you know. But once I was able to add this, when I actually saw what it was, but even then, I mean, I've made the comment that I would have shot it had I had my rifle, and I might have at one point there, but I still wasn't fully convinced it wasn't somebody until I got out. I kept thinking, you know, people are going to be out on the porch laughing when I get back out, you know. It was one of those. It's just one of those. It's there's such a level of disbelief that you're more convincing yourself, you know, in the moment that this can't be real. But you know, what am I experiencing and what am I seeing here? It just looks too good. You know, what I saw was essentially an ape guy. I would call it a caveman. No hair on its face, sparse hair on its body, light gray skin underneath, dark gray, dark black, shiny black looking, weathered face. I think it was male, and I think he was young. He was just black. His hair was black, but his skin was a lot, and he had mud all over him and leaves, and he was a mess. He wasn't. He had been laying down, looked like in the creek bed, but ran me off. And I think they had tried to run me out of there before. I was just too stupid to realize what was going on.
It must have been terrifying.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In that moment, probably, I don't think I could have imagined anything more terrifying than that. Because, you know, in my mind, and at one point, these are my last moments. You know, if I make it, I've got a shotgun. I've got a Benelli 3.5-inch 12-gauge automatic with high brass turkey shot, number 4 turkey shot, which is really nothing to sneeze at, you know. But he was going to have to get a lot closer for me to do any damage. And those were thoughts. You know, where am I going to shoot this thing if it comes running at me? You know, he was 80 feet away. So,
yeah. Whereabouts was that?
That was in Collins, Mississippi, March the 10th of 2007, the last day I ever hunted.
Oh my God. Oh, you don't go out again because of that?
That was the reason I didn't go for a long time, but I just recently went back in the woods. I went the last 2 nights I spent in Florida having some very interesting experiences.
Yeah. Oh, like what kind of thing?
Screaming, something we caught on thermal. I mean, it's this place is just riddled with these creatures. I don't know any better way to say it, but there are a lot of other oddities going on out there. We don't know what it is. Static, camera batteries dying.
Right.
You know, I was filming the whole time in night vision with my XF 400 Canon, which is just like a professional video camera, but it's got a night shot on it. And I kept thinking I'm going to have this really epic audio, but all you can hear is static. It's just, and people were telling me, we were live, and people were telling me they could hear static. So I don't know what that is. If that's FWC, or they know these things are out there. We've got 18-inch, which we're going to be putting a film out soon on Crypto Reality. That is going to have a bunch of evidence in it. 18-inch track, huge toes, 8 inches across the toe, 4 inches across the heel, just a massive human-shaped foot. And you know, when you couple that with all the other evidence, you know, the anecdotes, everything you get from eyewitnesses, what else can it be?
Wow. Shall I go round maybe a sort of clockwise way or something? Iron Dogger, what's your experience with Bigfoot?
Mine have been up in Alaska, And so one of my really profound experiences was the tracks that I found. And I was out training for a snow machine race, and it was 26 below, and that is the key element of this. And so there was no one else out there, and we were heading out on the trail far removed from anywhere. And when we laid the tracks out going out, when we were coming back, we were coming back on our same trail. And when we came back, I started to notice these barefoot tracks in our tracks, but and it was odd, and it took a minute for me to like really digest what was happening. But keep in mind, it's 26 below out there, and so I just pull on my brake and look over, and the distance between the step was the distance of my ski to the end of my track. Like it's over 6 foot. And it's like, it was really bizarre. And so I got off my snow machine and started looking at it. And I wore bunny boots. That's required gear for this particular race. And they're like a really big, huge Arctic boot that the Air Force wear and a lot of the military. And so when I got off, it dwarfed my bunny boot in its track, and I was just so perplexed, and I just couldn't make sense. And all I could think of was there was a hypothermic huge trapper out there running naked in the remote swamps of Alaska. And so when my partner pulled up, I took pointed to him and told her, we got to go help this person. And so I just jumped on my sled and took off following the trail. There's tracks. There's no real trails out there. Anyhow, so when we were, going through the brush, weaving our way as much as possible, we got to a point where there's nowhere further my snow machine could go. And this thing had, we're following its tracks. And I jumped off my sled and sunk up to my chest in snow. And that thing had post holed through that. So I was just absolutely perplexed. Absolutely. And when my partner pulled up, and she's an Alaska native, she said, I am not chasing wild man through the woods with you. And she turned around and left me. And that's like an absolute no-no. Like, you don't do that to your racing partner. And that's when I went, what's happening? And so I kind of scream into the woods, are you okay? Do you need help? And it just got this weird, anyhow, I just turned around. It was just really awkward. There's no way, like if you have any experience in the snow and wilderness out there, you're not trudging through the snow without making a deep trench. And this thing post holed through it. So it's like, I couldn't figure it out. So when we went back, I was still adamant that there was a rather large hypothermic trapper out there. And so when we went into where you turn into the search and rescue teams there at when we finally got in towards Big Lake, and when I walked in there, my partner was like, please don't, you're going to make a fool out of us. And she was just like, and I couldn't figure it out. Like I had a serious disconnect with Bigfoot and wild man and all of this. So when I went in there and I told him, like, there's someone out there, there's a hypothermic trapper out on the trail. He's probably in Swamp 5 area. And the bartender was sitting there. There's 3 guys at the bar, and they're just very nonchalantly, he's rinsing a glass out, and he looks at me and he's like, oh, that's wild man. And I'm just like, who's this wild man that no one seems concerned? It's 26 below. He's running around barefoot. Like, no one's worried about him. It was so weird. But I watched the news and read the newspaper for weeks after, just seeing if there was going to be someone showing up that was lost out there. Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Wow. And again, so were you familiar with the whole sort of lore around Bigfoot and those kinds of things before that?
I was familiar with it, but not like for whatever reason, never put the two together. It wasn't until much later on that, I was able to look back and go, oh, they are there in Alaska, and that could have been possibly what was going on. And then, I had an experience when I was a lot younger of something that had trailed us. And then when it stepped out on the trail behind, it was 100 yards away, which is quite a distance, but it still was so massive. And the way that it stood out and had its arm out and then its legs apart. And then when it came together, like there's no animal, even a bear's body is very long and their legs are very stubby. You know, it's
Mhm.
not like the body cavity on that thing the chest was massive, and it had long legs, and bears don't pull their arms down to the side, and they can't go ankle to ankle as far as I know, you know. And so it was really one of those hair-raising, like, let's just get out of here, run for your life kind of situation. But
Wow. And then you got, is that did you get in touch with, like, is that how the community sort of works, that you guys have had, most of you have had experiences? I imagine, Larry, you've also had an experience, is that right? And then Dr. Meldrum, you're the science behind, you know, of this. Is that correct? I think that's correct.
Go ahead,
There's
Doc.
assessment.
Who are you directed to?
I don't
Go ahead,
know.
Larry.
So
Oh, thanks a lot.
Oh,
Oh, there
what's
he
that?
is.
I'll just put that's one of the casts.
That's
That's Jeff
the
as well. That's
Oh,
Jeff
right.
on there.
Very handsome.
Yes, and the cast.
yes, it is handsome. Yes. Well, I'm not
Yeah.
scientific kibitzer off to the side. I mean, I have spent a lot of time in the field over the past, what has it been now, 26 years, and you know, my firsthand experiences are limited, but you know, I have found tracks on a half a dozen occasions. I've heard vocalizations several times. We've had things rifled through backpacks in camp, visit camp, you know, nocturnally, and break brush and, you know, try to intimidate. I caught a glimpse of something through night vision that could very well have been a Sasquatch. So I've had those experiences in addition to the opportunity to examine and evaluate very extensive data sets on prints and hair samples and vocalizations and so forth. So yeah, there's something to it. For sure.
Wow. And what's your background, sort of scientific, academically?
Sure. Well, my training is in anatomical sciences with an emphasis in physical anthropology, which means I teach human gross anatomy in the graduate level, full body dissection, laboratory anatomy course for allied health professions, and then I do research on the evolutionary history of human bipedalism and the adaptations that are associated with our unique behavior of walking upright, which includes consideration of fossilized footprints, you know, the Laetoli hominin tracks and others. I've reviewed the fossil footprint evidence from around the world. It includes locomotor studies of great apes and humans, electromyography, and force plate studies and so forth, all the things associated with the emergence, the pattern and timing in the fossil record, the emergence of those characteristics associated with walking on 2 feet. Ergo, the very pointed interest in the possibility of another surviving bipedal species living along, or more, living alongside us. So that's where I come into it.
Is the suggestion that Bigfoot might be a missing link, or a separate sort of strain of human?
Well, the notion of a missing link is really kind of a misnomer. I mean, historically, you know, it dates back to a time when the parade of life was called the Great Chain of Being, and that perceived gulf between us and everything else was viewed as a gap for which there must be some missing links in the chain that we weren't yet aware of. Now we have a very different sort of idea about the diversity, the diversification as a process rather than an end result of life, an evolutionary tree rather than a single chain. And so the notion of missing links really is a little misleading, but there are the idea that these are persisting branches on this tree that have that share some similarities of adaptation because of shared common ancestors, just as branches diverge from forks in that pattern of branching that indicate shared ancestral combinations of traits, these creatures are just simply parallel branches that have not gone extinct. But yeah, we can get into that a little more deeply, perhaps. But the scientific context, which is really quite fascinating, it was absent in 1967, for example, when Patterson presented his film evidence. A very different notion about human evolution prevailed at that time than does now. And at that time, there was no accommodation for the potential existence of such a creature. So it had to be hoaxed. I mean, that was just a given. It had to be hoaxed because such a thing couldn't exist. But now there's absolutely a context, an expectation that such things could in fact exist. And so the question is not, is it possible? It is instead, is it probable? Could something have survived under our nose, so to speak, without having been discovered, without having been recognized by science? Very different situation now, which is really fascinating, given this history that occurred prior to the framing of a theoretical paradigm that now accommodates the potential existence of such creatures.
Right. And I think that's the thing that most people have the biggest time getting their heads around or trying to believe is that it could have survived all that time just under our noses without us knowing about it. It's interesting. So you come at it from a purely scientific angle, and I think am I right in saying some people believe there might be a paranormal aspect? Is there anyone here who believe it might be a paranormal thing?
We hear it a lot. Myself, I'm not fully willing to let go of certain elements of reality, especially these things that seemingly repeal the laws of physics without better evidence. I mean, we have the anecdote, and it's not that these people aren't experiencing this, but it's highly subjective because it's the experience. Right. And what you have to consider is that person's state of mind in the moment, and what other outside influences might there be when experiencing these lights and orbs and things disappearing. And especially when we're afraid, fear as an antecedent, meaning you were feeling fearful before you experienced anything. It's a very, very powerful inception, and it can make you, I believe, have experiences that aren't actually happening. It's just your own personal experience and what the way you're perceiving actual events. That's just my take on it, but I could be wrong, and there could be explanations for these things. I contend high levels of EMF cause a lot of these things. People claim infrasound a lot, but EMF explains everything: hearing voices, mind speak, seeing lights, orbs, feeling watched, getting sick, ill, the whole zapped situation, draining batteries. These things happen with high levels of EMF, but where's it coming from?
It sounds like you're quite open-minded to what it might be. Larry, I feel like I've not included you at all. So where do you stand on this sort of paranormal versus science debate?
I'm a wildlife educator. I've taken animals into schools for 45 years. And that's the only reason I'm interested in this, because I've always said, if I see one of those things climb off a spaceship, I'm not interested in it anymore. I am officially done. If I see one just flat disappear, see ya. Okay, you guys can go with it, have fun. But I'm not interested in it. I think but how can you call these people that have seen these things liars? First of all, you have to see how big they are before you call them a liar. And then, and the blurry photographs and all that. And I've said, well, just because they've seen a Sasquatch, it doesn't mean they're a great photographer. Because most of the people that the sighting, the actual scene of it, is maybe 1, 2, 3 seconds. Across the road, gone. That's why to go back to a spot where something like that's happening, that's about silly, because that thing could be a mile away by the next morning, or who knows how long. It's just I know they exist because I've either had 1,000 liars tell me these stories, or 1 or 2 people told me the truth, and that's all we need. 1 or 2 people to say And the essential eyewitness is Bob Jackson, the Yellowstone Park Ranger, who watched a Bigfoot stalk a deer in Yellowstone National Park while he was on patrol.
Mhm.
I asked him, I said, Bob, did you talk about it when it happened? Oh no, he said, but I put it in my logbook. He said, I wasn't hiding anything, but I watched it, He said, I don't care if anybody believes me or not. So in the Patterson film, there it is. There's the proof. 1967, but science wasn't ready for it. So we are.
I don't think it has to be. I think it's not. It doesn't mean that people are lying, does it? I think Kerry explained several reasons why people might be mistaking other things for that. I can see Iron Dogger nodding. What does Dogger mean in American?
Well, it's a race. It's a title. Iron Dogger is a title. It's
Okay.
It comes from a 2,000-mile snow machine race. It's
Okay.
done in
It has
5
a
days.
rude meaning in the UK.
That's what I keep hearing, but not the same.
Okay, but yeah, you think that perhaps
I wouldn't call Iron Doggers that.
you think that there might be people mistaking things because of or like Kerry was saying, all the different electro things.
Well, there's such a spiritual aspect to this as well. And I would not disregard any of the lore and things like that have been around these beings. But at the same time, what I experienced, it's hard for me to say something would want to be out there in 26 below if it had the opportunity to portal anywhere. In my mind, that's not an opportunity place to be and want to be. It's pretty cold. And so that's where it's hard for me, but I would never say that didn't happen, because I've also filmed an orb that it seemed like whatever, and it's out in, Wasilla. There's nothing else around, and I have nothing to explain it. There's, and there's a plane that goes by afterwards, and you can clearly hear the planes because the air is crisp. And so sound carries a very long distance there. And so, when you see that thing coming along the trees and then it kind of goes off into the trees, it's a little awkward. But there's a lot of other explanations it could be. It could be debris from space. Like, I'm not going to assume what anything is at that point. But I don't want to say that these people aren't seeing or experiencing what they're experiencing at the same time. It's just because it doesn't fit my logic or my, what I see as these beings being capable of.
I understand that. It's difficult for me. My position as a journalist, it's really, really hard. And I'm not going to say, oh, I don't believe in Bigfoot or whatever, because firstly, I think it'd be quite rude of me to come here when you've all had these first-hand experiences with Bigfoot. And I'm like, I don't believe you. And as Larry says, it might sort of suggest I think you're lying, which I don't. But I've done documentaries in my work with exorcisms, for example. So I had to learn how to perform exorcisms, right? And I actually performed exorcisms on people who had things like schizophrenia, and they actually got better, these people who had schizophrenia and different psychological illnesses. And I don't, so somebody who was there in the room and saw me do an exorcism, they might believe I really sort of got the will of God and put it into some, to fight demons and stuff. But I don't really believe in that. And I think what really happened was suggestion and placebo, and that these people I exorcised, they knew how to act, and because they'd seen these movies before, and on a subconscious level, they acted in a certain way and they got better. And then a year or two later, I went to see them and they were all much worse again because the placebo effect had worn off. And this has very little to do with Bigfoot, except to say that sometimes things from the outside that would have seemed very much, and it would have seemed very much like, oh, this person's, exorcism, God, devil, whatever. Whereas I know I wasn't channeling any kind of God. So again, just to go back to Larry's point about, I just want to reaffirm that it doesn't mean I would call anybody who believed that the exorcism that I did was real a liar, just that they had seen things with their eyes. And the other thing is, I don't think you can trust anything that we see anyway, because it's like I was talking to my girlfriend just before about like Concords. So I don't know why they stopped having Concords, but the planes and how they would go, and then you'd hear the sound afterwards, right? And that's deceptive. that's not what's really happening. But your brain and your mind, and by the time the audio waves get to your ear and your eyes, and I've certainly seen weird things over the years. I went looking for aliens for another piece that I did. And what, some people were saying, look, those are the UFOs. Can you see the lights in the distance? And I was like, oh, those are car headlights for me. And I have to always go in with like, but I might be wrong. Because what the hell who the hell am I to go to these people who've been seeing UFOs their whole lives and go like, you're wrong. It's just what I saw. So that's the thing. But I mean, so yeah, I just want to just to say that I would never say that anybody's lying or to even patronize and you go, you didn't see what you saw. It's just like, who knows, because you guys don't believe everything that somebody says that they've seen, right? You don't believe every time someone says, oh, I saw a UFO. Some people must be misguided and some people might be telling the truth. So Dr. Meldrum on that, or shall I ask Daniela, do you want to still be getting some questions?
I was just going to say on that, there is people that can misidentify stuff, say like with the lights, it could be anything, but it's these people that have seen them face to face where there's no mistaking anything. But what comes with that sometimes is that kind of, oh, they just disappeared in front of us. There was a light behind them. So you don't know if one is connected to the other or if it's just coincidence but there's a lot of stories like that. There's a lot of experiences that have something else added to it. But, for me, those don't matter. It's those people I've spoke to have seen them, and you just know that they've had an experience that's terrified them. And, the PTSD is a massive part to this. It's like the effect of these things that are having on people when they see them. It's like no joke. Some people are just not going back doing the things that they loved anymore. There's got to be something in it. There's got to be something there. But it's so frustrating to have no proof.
Yeah, that must be. I can imagine that totally. Do you find, Daniela, that in the Bigfoot community, are people also more open to, say, UFOs and also maybe to religious miracles like Christianity and things like that?
It's all there. There's so many different things. Kind of, for me, and no disrespect to anyone, really, really murking the waters with this. And, if you realistically just stripped this all down to what we know, we know nothing, and everything else is. I was having a conversation with someone the other night, and I said that, a picture tells 1,000 words, doesn't it? It can tell 1,000 stories or whatever. And these moments in time with these creatures, when someone has a sighting, say, they're trying to describe what they saw and their experience, but none of that really defines what these creatures are. It's just they're painting the picture of what they saw, of what happened to them. But, when we think about it, we don't know anything about these things. It's just so ridiculous in a way that why isn't anybody talking? It's like the biggest mystery in the world for me. I love a mystery. Why isn't anyone talking about this when there's so many witnesses? And like Dr. Meldrum, they're not just prints. You can tell these things have something unique in their foot. They have the mid-tarsal break. They have the dermal ridges. It's, there's something there. Why isn't anybody acknowledging this for people?
Well, I suppose that's, for years and for centuries and millennia, there have been ghost sightings, right? And the ghost sightings, and I know this is a different subject totally, but, you were saying it's sort of all mixed a bit with, and the ghost sightings always tend to be sort of ghosts who look like they're from the Gothic period, when with literature and stuff. You don't get like caveman ghosts, right? It's always like a ghost that comes from the right literature, from the, so that's why people with ghosts, and again, I have a feeling that maybe like Dr. Meldrum might not be on board with the ghosts as much as the animals, so the physical side, but so the point is it is just difficult for people to take on board, isn't it? And I feel like we want to see, and you're saying there is evidence. So yeah, Dr. Meldrum, I want to know what is like the most compelling evidence of Bigfoot?
Well, from my perspective, and as this conversation is revealed, everything has to do with perspective and perception. But given my expertise and my attention to things that impress me, it's the footprint evidence. I mean, that's what drew me in. That's where my attention has been focused, because you have something, although it is trace evidence, it's you have a photograph of an actual impression in the ground, or a cast if the conditions were such, and the wherewithal and materials were available to make a documentation of that cast. You have an object that can be repetitively examined and evaluated, measured, compared, and so forth. So there's a level of objectivity that is attained that is challenging in some of these other types of evidence, especially when documentation is wanting. And even with the footprints, I've learned, and I deal with this on a regular basis. I mean, just yesterday, day before yesterday, no, it was yesterday, someone forwarded to me a report that had been posted in the BFRO. Surprised this even got into the BFRO, of a track find in where was it? It was up in the Great Lakes area or somewhere. But I mean, it was a quadrupedal trackway in the snow. I mean, absolutely clearly quadrupedal. But yet this person was chalking this up as another piece of evidence. He wanted my opinion of it. It was very easy to demonstrate why this had nothing to do with Sasquatch. But if there isn't that level of documentation, then you've got one more story about this an enigmatic set of footprints, which is nothing. And so when you have no documentation, when you have these reports of actual visual encounters, especially when they're under less than ideal circumstances. I mean, the Patterson-Gimlin film, not only as a piece of cinematography, set the standard very, very high, but the conditions were remarkable. I mean, it was broad daylight in an open space there, and seen for 60 seconds instead of, as Larry pointed out, the typical 1, 2, or 3 seconds. And so unless you have some documentation, you're at the mercy of the experience of the witness, their expectations, their ability to interpret what it is that they actually saw, and of course all the circumstances of the sighting. There's just so much in so many of these online data sets, and it's just kind of ballooned with the internet, with the increased use of the internet. There are so many bumps in the night and bent trees and just extraneous stuff that almost certainly has nothing to do with Sasquatch, and inflates the impression. It galls me every time a documentarian makes the statement that Bigfoot has been reported from every state in the Union. Well, they may have been reported. That doesn't mean they exist in every state in the Union. People see them in every state in the Union, but then again, that doesn't mean they exist in every state in the Union. So it's a real challenge, and as a bit of a lightning rod, I get a constant flow. I mean, on a daily basis, I get emails and phone calls from people. I have to really kind of guard my time rather vigorously, but I'm sifting through, and quite frankly, 9.5 out of 10 are absolutely worthless. I mean, I don't mean to discourage people from reporting and documenting and sharing their information with me, but there's a lot. These creatures are extremely rare and very rarely encountered, if in fact they do exist. I'm convinced they do exist, but on that basis, I'm also convinced that they're extremely rare. It's a large-bodied mammal at the top of its food chain, no natural predators, long life, slow reproduction. Larry can share his insights about primate natural history, great ape natural history as well. These creatures, it doesn't take a lot of them to sustain a viable population in the North American continent. And so encounters are almost uniformly by happenstance. Even those people who are trying to have an encounter and on the rare instance are successful. I mean, go back to Patterson and Gimlin. I mean, it was after 2 weeks of trying to find some sign of some evidence, and the encounter was absolutely happenstance. I mean, it was purely by chance.
Yeah, Larry, do you want to tell us about some of that stuff?
About what? About what?
About the mating and that kind of thing.
Is there children watching this?
Great.
Couple.
I'll talk about
He had
Bigfoot getting it on.
Before I made that comment, so something he wants to share.
Well, I just say that I've talked to so many people about this. I have so many eyewitnesses, and it's a subject that I wouldn't be interested in, not unless I believed this is another animal living in a forest.
Right.
Because to many of your Native American tribes all across the country, their thoughts are it's no different than the wolf, the bear, the deer. They know it's there. A lot of them believe that if they see one, it's a bad omen. And they're not looking for it. Believe me. Most people, when I say they're looking for it, I ask, what do you think you're going to find at the end of this journey? I mean, it's not what you think. It's not what you think. I'll be doing a presentation somewhere, and a young man will come up, usually a teenager. He'll say, if I saw one, I'd track it. And I'd say, well, that's real easy to say in this well-lit library here in Hammond, Indiana. But if you're out in the woods and you see something that's 7, 8, 9 feet tall with an ape-like look and covered with hair and basically looks you up and down like you're just a piece of nothing, you're not gonna. And they'll just, turn around and they're gone just like that. So what I believe, here's why I believe the Bigfoot thing is so good. And I thought this 50 years ago when I started messing, this is great for young people. I think every child should have their own Bigfoot group, because anything that gets them outdoors, around Mother Nature, they get muddy, wading creeks, look for tracks, go for it. I say, just go for it, because it is an intriguing subject. So research it. Kids are the answer. We do. I've talked to a lot. I have a young lady who's 9 years old that has become my friend through Facebook. Is a Bigfoot enthusiast. She'll call me up and she's read Doc's books. She's read them all, and she'll quote them verbatim. And I just think this is so cool. I just think this is great. In fact, I'd already told her, I said, when I go on, you're going to get all my Bigfoot stuff. And so.
What a morbid thought.
What's that? She gets all my Bigfoot stuff?
Well, when you leave this, what would you say? The earthly realm.
Yeah. Well, I could have
this round earth, by the way.
I could have offered.
Get that clear.
I spoke to a guy on my channel who thinks we can. I speak to 2 people on my channel who think we can live forever. So, and they explained the science behind it and how they can extend our lives and stuff. So
now that's a nut. That is a nut. That is a fellow walking around with a couple things up here that are not connected.
Well, if he's right, then that girl's not going to
get.
She's not going to get her hands on your stuff anytime soon if they are right.
Who wants to live forever?
Really?
Christopher Lambert.
Larry makes a really good point, and in fact, I'll take the opportunity to put a little plug in over. What I did for summer vacation last year was to complete a series of young reader activity and learning workbooks. Collaborated with a really great artist, and he was able to take my cut and paste composition draft and turn it into just a beautiful rendition of all sorts of activities for young people that introduce them not only to the biology, but to the geography and the ecology and the culture of the regions and vocabulary and terminology and so forth. And I'm hoping there'll be a real hit as an opportunity for young people, for teachers of young people, even adults. It says for 8 and older, because I'm sure that the illustrations are so engaging that even adult readers, I think, will find them really fun. But this idea of not just limited to young people, but the idea of citizen science is really important, because, as I mentioned, given the rarity, given the difficulty of intentional encounters and observations, as a scientist, I can't go out like a typical, conservation biologist and systematically collect data. I'm very much at the mercy of these happenstance encounters, and so witnesses who have educated themselves, who have learned something about the woods and so forth, the ecology in their neck of the woods, and who have learned how to make a footprint cast, how to place a scale in the photograph, a simple thing like that. These are all just simple skills. And I'd like to see not just the kids getting muddy looking for footprints, but the old codgers as well, getting out there and staying young by searching for Sasquatch. It is a great hook, if nothing else. And I'm quite convinced it's much, much more. But even if it's just a concept, it's a great hook that enlivens people's curiosity and imagination, and hopefully motivates them to get out in the woods and learn more about their surroundings.
So I think that sounds great. I was just looking up, as well, the rarest animal in the world. Apparently it's the vaquita, which is a type of porpoise. And there are I think there are 18 of them in the world. But we know about them, and they're off in the sea somewhere, which is huge. It's even bigger than, the land and the woods and stuff like that. And we know about them, and we've photographed and filmed them and stuff. And we have, dead corpses of the vaquita porpoise. How is it possible that we've never come across a corpse of any, dead Bigfoot?
Can I take this one?
Mm-hmm.
And this is just what I think, because if you can look at the subject through the prism of they exist, you can't fall back on, well, they're just not out there, then there has to be a viable answer for these. And mine is that a sentient being, self-aware, apparently, emotionally intelligent. Okay. This is the way it seems to me. This is the only possible explanation, because they exist, is predisposed to hiding, not taught it, born in them to hide from everything. Even in the dark, these creatures are hiding, apparently. Why would a creature like that leave one of their dead around for us to find? If they're emotionally intelligent, they can love, they can hate. Self-awareness, creates these things. So they're going to leave dad just laying there rotting? No, they're going to do something with it. These are the things that only seems apparent to me. Well, what I hear a lot of is, when I talk to people, is I would have, or we would have. I've been in the woods my whole life. I would have seen something. I would have, it's the very arrogant notion that people have, that they should, they have their own idea. And, my answer is always, well, you're assuming a lot about a creature you don't believe exists. You're assuming that if they exist, that this is how they should be. We should see them walking through the woods. And to my experience, these creatures are embedded in the environment, probably spend the majority of their life on the ground, behind a bush. You go in the woods, they just get further and further away from you. These are the only things that seem self-evident to me, because they do exist. Now, that being said, there's the encounter, the experience. And I'm of a different mind than Dr. Meldrum. I think there are a lot of them out there, because of the nature of the creature and the amount of sightings. We end up getting about 50 a year, just worldwide. And I think that was, as of 2019, that's probably different since COVID. But, and, you've got people that just want 15 minutes of fame, that will make something up and just give you a story. But of the tens of thousands of reported sightings just since 1995, since the BFRO came into existence, that have been reported to them, how many of those have to be real? Just one. Just one.
Yeah.
And we're not talking about, I'm sorry, let me finish with this. We're not talking about people that are just, drunkards or old deluded people. We're talking about people with full faculties of reason, don't do drugs, don't drink, police officers, trained observers seeing these creatures. So that's kind of my answer to the why don't we have a body question in the long loop.
Is there a consensus on that? Does anybody have any different thoughts on that? That seems quite compelling to me, Kerry. Well, Iron Dogger, you put your hand up.
Yeah, another factor that could be at play too is like the animals that have a natural instinct to go and hide when they're ready to die. A bear will do that. A dog will do that. Even your house dog will, try and go hide somewhere if it's feeling like it's that time. And that could be a portion of what's going on as well. Maybe they're,
Is that right? I didn't know
Cats
that.
do.
That's very sad.
Cats definitely do that. I know that. Your house cat, if it's ill or
Deer.
just old, it'll wander off and just go and die on its own somewhere.
Wow.
It is a
That's
sign
so
of weakness,
sad.
isn't it? When they feel vulnerable, they don't want to be,
Deer will go to water.
Sure. And you combine that with all of the other biological and physical factors out there in the environment. No animal that dies in nature sticks around for very long. I used to show my students there was a case where an elephant had been poached, and so to study the taphonomy, the fate of a carcass after death and the remains, they put a time-lapse camera on it. And here's this massive, 1.5 ton, 2 ton elephant. In 2 weeks, there wasn't even a grease spot. Every single speck of it was gone. And so those, that's the African savanna. Of course, everything's is amplified perhaps, but in a Pacific Northwest environment or a woodland environment of the Great Lakes or the Appalachia, the soils of forested environments tend to be very acidic. In the Pacific Northwest, the geology is volcanic, which tends to add to the acidity of the soils. So what isn't chewed up or carted off by gnawers and chewers, rodents and such, lagomorphs, rabbits and porcupines and squirrels, even deer will chew on bone to get at the calcium. But what's left, if anything exposed to the elements for any length of time, quickly breaks up and just deteriorates. I would just again offer to carry the notion about numbers. One of the ways we can kind of get at the numbers too is to look in those in some of those rare instances where the conditions are such that we have a rather extensive track record in a given region. It points to just a few recognizable individuals whose tracks are repetitively seen over time. I've shown numerous examples. Cliff Barrickman has done a really good job where he's gone through and shows how numerous examples of footprints for the Blue Mountains, for example, is one place where the soil conditions are such and the road conditions are conducive to footprints on the just graded dirt roads, no gravel bed, and a very silty soil with a very high lust content. So there's an inordinate footprint record from areas like that, combined with some individuals who are quite dogged in their efforts to try to get up there and spend time in the woods. But you've got, just a few social units, a few what appear to be adult males, one or two, and a number of what appear to be females based on their size and the narrowness, the gracile nature of their footprints and offspring in tow. And those individuals are seen over and over and over again over several decades of time. So it doesn't seem to me to convey the evidence of, there doesn't seem to be evidence of numerous, these are not in social groups. Almost all the footprint finds, almost all the sightings are solitary individuals. I think that they are, semi-solitary in the manner of, say, an orangutan. And they only get together to form consort pairs, adult males and females, when the female is receptive. In the case of orangutans, could be anywhere from 4 to 6 years. Not every Friday on date night, but years of time in between forming consorts and procreating.
I can understand that, and I can see that. My point is this, and the way I view it is, I'm not assuming that every one of these creatures out there is going to leave behind something for us to detect, like a track. There could be those, and it seems to be the case. I was in an area around these creatures for 7 years, looking at the ground for tracks, deer tracks given, but I never saw a track. I never found anything outside the ordinary. And there were so many things that happened in this time frame that made no sense. It was like an equation that just couldn't work out until you add this creature. Then it all made perfect sense. And this was over a period of 7 years. And it took 7 years for them to reveal themselves to me. So what I look at are other animals. I look at white-tailed deer. How many white-tailed deer are there in the lower 48? 30 to 35 million white-tailed deer. There's over 3 million just in the state of Mississippi. Do we see all of their tracks all the time? I mean, how hard is it to hunt a white-tailed deer? It's one of the hardest things there is. I did it for 29 years. And that's what I look at is I look at the sighting frequency of, next to the seemingly non-social nature of the creature. There may be those that just willy-nilly, a family group. Is there any reason for us to think that these creatures are connected from coast to coast? You know, if they do have a language, even if it's just gestures and mumbling, you know, it would, you know, if it's language, do they all speak the same language? I doubt it. The Native Americans didn't speak the same language. They didn't have Facebook. You know, they weren't connected with one another. So this is kind of how I see this. It's a regional from place to place. You may have some that are so hidden and stay so far away from people that you're never going to find any sign of them. And those that are a little bit more lackadaisical, this is just, it's all conjecture. You know? But I just see the possibility for there being a lot of them because of their apparent proclivities.
It's fascinating. Look, you guys make a good case, to be honest. I mean, it's all really interesting stuff. You know what's interesting to me is, let's say Bigfoot does exist, and this is a question I ask, sort of knowing the answer in many respects. Why does it matter to you guys? Does it help? Is it just like an extra mystery to solve? Does it add something to the universe, or does it create a sense of community for you guys between each other?
It's the truth. The truth matters. It's as simple as that for us. For us here, it's about awareness, because we know what happens to people that are not aware when they run into one of these things. It happened to me. I was completely clueless. It wasn't like I had even the notion there was anything like that out there. And then that's what made it so confusing in the moment. But people need to be made aware. Prepare yourself for this, because the lasting effects, the post-traumatic stress of seeing, we're not emotionally equipped, in my estimation, to run into these creatures in the woods. We're just not. It has a long-lasting effect, and especially if you don't face it and deal with it, which is usually the case, who are you going to go to? No one's going to believe you, you know. Yeah. And we get a ton of ridicule here, but you know, we don't respond. We don't let people who ridicule control us and our response, because that's what you become ultimately, because that's out there. That's
the internet. You know, I get enough of that myself.
But this is a safe place here. Bigfoot Odyssey is a safe place. We've made it that. But in my estimation, that's my answer there. Anyway,
I think that's great. Iron Dogger, what were you going to say about it?
Well, I just think there's so much to the subject that it's really hard to, when you start tiptoeing into it, you know, it's really hard to grasp all of the different perspectives and things that come in. Like, you know, there are so many different perspectives with it. But for me, I have a lot of answers or questions that I have, and I want some answers to it. And the other aspect is, you could prepare. Like, I've been out in the wilderness in Alaska. I could prepare for dealing with a grizzly. I know they're out there. I know what to deal with. I can deal with moose charging. I can deal with all of these things. But if you don't know this thing is out there, you have no way to prepare one way or the other. And even just being mentally prepared for something like that is a big deal. It could make the biggest difference for someone's experience altogether. And just knowing they're there, you know, I think that's important.
I've also picked up that once someone's seen this, it's like an obsession to need to find out what it was they saw.
Yeah.
So it becomes almost, you know, addictive, this subject. I just want to go back a second to what you were saying about, you know, these things are intelligent. They make choices. When I think about how a bear, I was talking about this the other week, how a bear would react to someone that was coming near its young or near food, it would just rip you apart. There's no two ways about it. These creatures, people have bumped into them, maybe with where there's been young, or it's definitely been a situation like with Kerry where it's trying to say, back off, get out, or something like that. It didn't make the choice to kill him. And there'd be so, you'd think there'd be more people being ripped apart by Sasquatch. It makes a choice. It can choose, unlike a bear. And, I don't know what the reason is. But like you say, there's the language as well. They must have some social something going on. So, I mean, I don't know. It's the biggest mystery, and it's what I love mysteries, and this is the biggest one going for me.
So do I. Daniela, how do you think this has gone? Because you guys go on for quite a long time into the early hours of our time, anyway.
We'll only do an hour tonight. We're pretty much, unless you want to, if you've got more questions.
No, I think you've really enlightened me, and you've been so polite and patient with me. It's been fascinating to learn about, and I hope to speak to you all again at some point, and I'll be subscribing to the channel. And no, it's been really, really nice, and yeah, though that's it really. I just want to promote my podcast as well, if you don't mind, and just tell everyone, please, all these lovely people in the thingy, the chat thing, to come and check it out and subscribe, because I don't have any subscribers compared to you lot, and it's so hard to build them up, isn't it? And then everyone has a go at me all the time. So I like that this is like a safe space, and I think that your people are not going to be that judgmental and angry, and like
I think they'll be interested in the stuff you do as well. So I've put a link. The link is in the description. I've just put a link in the chat as well for people to go check out Andrew's channel. Go and check him out on Sean Atwood as well, because Sean Atwood is the best.
Yeah, we don't give him more subscribers. He's got 700,000.
He's got enough. Maybe he could give us a shout out, because he's brilliant.
He should do.
You should tell him how amazing he is.
He's a complete nutcase, isn't he? He's mad, but he's so funny. But last thing he needs for his big head is to get more subscribers. No, he is fantastic, and I love getting to do his show as well. But if you've got a choice and you've got to subscribe to either me or him, I've only got 3,500, so I could do with him. He doesn't need them.
Well, look, I want to thank everyone for coming on tonight. Dr. Jeff Meldrum, thank you so much at such short notice as well for coming on. I appreciate that. Larry, we're going to be on Tuesday night. Yes, with the Bigfoot mugs. We're going to be doing Drawing Bigfoot on Tuesday night, and Wade Bell is coming back, so that's going to be a great show. Kerry, you're doing your stuff?
Just got back from the Florida thing. Did a really good shoot. Crypto Reality going to be telling their story, showing all their best evidence, and just giving the rundown of what they've gone through for the last 7 years. And we didn't have the equipment with us that we really wanted for the Impossible series, so we're gonna be going back and filming with that. We've got some long range lenses and stuff ordered. We're just trying to get something better. That's all, something clear. Yeah. We can catch them blurry. It's just getting them clear.
Convincing. We can all but try. Once again, thanks everyone. We'll be back as well on Wednesday night with Researchers Report or Wednesday Encounters. Whatever, we'll be here. But until then, everyone, have a good night.